of Windsor Castle, where centuries of royal secrets whisper through ancient stone walls. A single phone call at 3:47 a.m. would reshape the future of the British monarchy forever. Prince William, still in his pajamas and barely awake, listened as his father's voice delivered news that would transform him from heir apparent to the most powerful figure in the royal household. Overnight, the world would wake up to headlines they never saw coming. Behind closed doors, palace staff scrambled to rewrite protocols that hadn't changed in decades. By sunrise, the carefully choreographed machine of royal tradition would be operating under completely new management, with William holding keys to decisions that would affect millions across the Commonwealth. But this wasn't just another royal appointment. This was the moment when the future king stepped out of his father's shadow and into a role that would test everything he learned about leadership, family loyalty, and the weight of a crown that would someday rest on his head. The palace gates may have looked the same that morning, but inside, everything had changed. What happened in those crucial hours between the phone call and the morning announcement would reveal truths about the royal family that even their closest advisors never suspected. And William? He was about to discover that some responsibilities can't be prepared for, no matter how much royal training you've received. The grandfather clock in the hallway of Adelaide Cottage chimed 3:30 as Prince William reached for his phone, squinting at the bright screen in the darkness. King Charles's name appeared on the caller ID, and William's heart immediately began racing. Royal protocol dictated that calls at this hour meant only one thing: crisis. William, his father's voice came through clearly, though strained with exhaustion. I need you to come to Windsor immediately. To bring Catherine, but leave the children sleeping. We'll explain when you arrive. Within 20 minutes, William found himself speeding through the empty roads of Windsor, his wife Catherine beside him, both still trying to process what could require such urgent attention. The security detail had been minimal, just 2 cars, suggesting this wasn't about external threats, but something deeply internal to the royal family. The private entrance to Windsor Castle stood illuminated by floodlights, an unusual sight that confirmed the gravity of whatever awaited them. Sir Clive Alderton, the king's private secretary, met them at the door with a grim expression that William had rarely seen in their decade of working together. Your Royal Highness, Alderton began, his usual formal tone carrying an undertone of something William couldn't quite identify. His Majesty is waiting in the oak drawing room with several senior household members. The situation requires immediate attention and, I must emphasize, complete discretion. As they walked through corridors lined with portraits of William's ancestors, each ruler having faced their own moments of crisis, William felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The castle, usually bustling with staff even in late hours, felt eerily quiet except for their footsteps echoing on the ancient stone floors. The oak drawing room doors opened to reveal not just King Charles, but also the Lord Chamberlain, the master of the household, and Sir Edward Young, former private secretary to Queen Elizabeth II, who had been quietly advising on the transition. And the assembled group represented the inner circle of royal power, and their presence together at this hour spoke to the magnitude of whatever crisis had emerged. William, Catherine, Charles stood, his face showing the strain of sleepless hours. Please sit. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but the documentation is all here. He gestured to a mahogany table covered with official papers, seals, and what appeared to be legal documents bearing multiple signatures. The story that unfolded over the next 2 hours would later be described by palace insiders as the most significant behind-the-scenes development in royal history since the abdication crisis of 1936, a combination of constitutional law, family dynamics, and pure political necessity had created a situation that required immediate action but had been kept completely hidden from public view. 3 weeks earlier, a private meeting between Charles and the Prime Minister had revealed intelligence about potential threats to the monarchy's stability, not from external sources, but from within the extended royal family itself. Certain members had been making financial decisions and political statements that, while not illegal, threatened to undermine the carefully maintained political neutrality that formed the foundation of the modern constitutional monarchy. The situation had reached a critical point when intercepted communications revealed plans for what could only be described as a coordinated attempt to influence government policy through royal connections. While the individuals involved genuinely believed they were acting in Britain's best interests, their actions threatened to drag the crown into political controversy that could destabilize the entire institution. The constitutional experts have been working around the clock, Sir Edward Young explained, his voice carrying the weight of decades of royal service. The solution we've developed is unprecedented, but it's also the only way to protect the monarchy's future while addressing the immediate crisis. Charles turned to William with an expression that mixed paternal concern with royal duty. Son, what we're proposing will effectively make you the operational head of the royal household, with authority over all family members' public activities, financial arrangements, and official communications. It's a role that doesn't officially exist, but one that the current circumstances make absolutely necessary. Catherine reached for William's hand as the implications began to sink in. This wasn't just about taking on additional responsibilities. It was about becoming the person who would make decisions about his own family members' lives, potentially restricting their freedoms and activities in ways that would fundamentally change family dynamics. The legal framework being proposed was complex, but ingenious. Using existing provisions in royal warrants and household regulations combined with updated security protocols, they could create a position that gave William unprecedented authority while maintaining the appearance of normal royal operations to the outside world. The beauty of this approach, the Lord Chamberlain explained, is that it appears to be simply an expansion of existing security and protocol measures. The public will see it as Prince William taking on more responsibilities as heir apparent, which is natural and expected. They won't realize the extent of the authority being transferred. But William understood immediately that this authority would come with a price that went far beyond public perception. Family relationships that had already been strained by years of controversy would face new pressures when relatives realized their independence had been significantly curtailed by someone they still thought of as Charles's son rather than their superior in the royal hierarchy. The documentation spread across the table outlined every aspect of the transition. Financial oversight of all royal family members, approval authority for public appearances and statements, control over official residences and staff assignments, and most significantly, the power to effectively remove royal titles and privileges from family members whose actions threaten the institution. William, Charles said quietly, I won't pretend this is what either of us wanted, but the alternative is watching everything your grandmother built, everything our family has represented for centuries, slowly crumble due to the actions of people who don't understand the delicate balance that keeps this institution relevant and respected. The room fell silent as William absorbed the magnitude of what was being proposed. In the space of a few hours, he would transition from heir apparent to the person responsible for managing not just his own public role, but the entire royal family's public and private activities. It was a responsibility that no amount of royal training had prepared him for. Catherine squeezed his hand, and William saw in her eyes the same recognition he felt. This decision would define not just their future, but the future of the monarchy itself. The weight of centuries of royal tradition, the expectations of the British people, and the need to preserve an institution that connected the present to 1,000 years of history, all rested on his answer. As dawn approached outside the ancient windows of Windsor Castle, Prince William looked around the room at the faces of advisors and family members waiting for his decision. The grandfather clock in the corner began chiming 6 times, marking the end of one era and the beginning of another in the long history of the British crown. When do we begin? He asked. The transformation of the British monarchy had begun not with fanfare or public ceremony, but in the quiet hours before sunrise, with a prince who understood that sometimes the greatest acts of leadership happen in shadows, away from the cameras and crowds, in moments when duty demands more courage than any public appearance could ever require. By 7 o'clock that morning, new protocols were being quietly implemented throughout all royal residences. Staff members received updated instructions about reporting structures and communication procedures. Security arrangements were modified to reflect new authority hierarchies. And in what would later be recognized as one of the most significant shifts in royal operations since World War II, Prince William began making decisions that would reshape how the British royal family operated in the modern world. The sun rose on a monarchy that looked identical to the outside world, but had fundamentally changed in ways that would only become apparent in the months and years ahead. And at the center of it all was a prince who had accepted a burden that would test every aspect of his character, his relationships, and his understanding of what it truly meant to serve the crown. By 8 o'clock that same morning, Prince William sat behind a desk in what had been Queen Elizabeth II's private study, surrounded by briefing folders that contained information about his family members' activities that even he had never known existed. The transformation from heir apparent to operational head of the royal household had begun with a speed that surprised even the palace's most experienced staff members. Lady Susan Hussey, who had served as Queen Elizabeth's lady-in-waiting for over 60 years, entered the study carrying a leather portfolio that she placed carefully on the desk. Her presence alone signaled the historical significance of what was happening. She had witnessed every major royal transition since the 1960s, and her involvement meant this change carried the weight of institutional memory. "Your Royal Highness," she began, using a tone that somehow conveyed both respect and maternal guidance. "These files contain the current status of every royal family member's public commitments, private arrangements, and ongoing concerns. Some of what you'll read may be surprising, but it's essential information for the decisions you'll need to make today." The first file William opened concerned his uncle, Prince Andrew, whose activities had been under careful monitoring since stepping back from public duties. The documentation revealed a complex web of business relationships, property dealings, and social connections that, while not necessarily improper, created potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited by those seeking to damage the monarchy's reputation. More concerning was the file on Princess Anne's daughter Zara Tyndall, whose husband Mike's media appearances and commercial endorsements had been walking an increasingly fine line between acceptable royal family member behavior and potentially problematic exploitation of royal connections. The file contained transcripts of recorded conversations that suggested some business partners were specifically seeking to capitalize on the royal connection in ways that could create constitutional issues. But it was the file marked "Immediate Action Required" that truly illustrated the scope of the crisis William now needed to manage. Prince Harry's ongoing public statements and legal actions in the United States had created a situation where foreign courts and media organizations were effectively being given jurisdiction over British royal family disputes, a constitutional nightmare that threatened to set precedents affecting the monarchy's sovereignty. Catherine entered the study carrying a breakfast tray, but her expression showed she understood the gravity of what her husband was reviewing. Over their years of marriage, she had developed an intuitive understanding of royal protocol and the delicate balance required to maintain the institution's stability while supporting individual family members' needs and aspirations. "The legal team is standing by," she said quietly, setting the tray on a side table. "Sir Edward thinks the first decision should be about immediate communication protocols, establishing clear lines of authority before anyone realizes how significantly things have changed." The genius of the plan Charles had outlined became clearer as William reviewed each file. Rather than making dramatic public announcements about new authority structures, the transition would appear to be a natural evolution of William's existing role as heir apparent. Family members would gradually discover their reduced independence through seemingly routine protocol updates and administrative changes. The first test came at precisely 9:30, when Prince Andrew called William's private line, intending to discuss a charity event he wanted to attend the following week. Under the old system, such decisions would have been made by Andrew himself in consultation with his private office. Under the new arrangements, William now held veto power over all royal family members' public appearances. "Andrew," William said, trying to balance familial warmth with the authority his new role required, "I'm reviewing all family members' commitments to ensure they align with our current strategic priorities. And you give me 24 hours to coordinate with the broader schedule." The brief pause on the other end of the line told William that his uncle had detected something different in the conversation, though he couldn't yet identify what had changed. This delicate balance, exercising new authority while maintaining family relationships, would define every interaction William had with royal family members in the coming weeks. By midday, the ripple effects of the morning's changes were already becoming visible to those who knew how to read the subtle signs of palace operations. Private secretaries across the royal household had received updated protocol guides. Security arrangements for several family members had been quietly modified. Most significantly, all external communications from royal family members now required approval from William's office. A change presented as a temporary security measure but actually representing a permanent shift in control. The lunch meeting in the castle's green drawing room brought together the key figures who would support William in his new role. Sir Clive Alderton outlined the day-to-day operational aspects, while the master of the household explained how staffing arrangements would be adjusted to support the new authority structure. Most important was the presentation by the royal communications team about how public perception of these changes would be managed. The public narrative, explained the communications secretary, will focus on Prince William's natural progression toward taking on greater responsibilities as heir apparent, qualities, his understanding of modern challenges, and his commitment to protecting the monarchy's future. The actual extent of his new authority will remain confidential. Catherine, who had been largely silent during the morning briefings, now voiced the concern that had been weighing on both their minds. What about the children? George, Charlotte, and Louis need to understand that their father's role has changed, but they also need protection from the additional pressure this brings to our family. The question highlighted one of the most complex aspects of William's new position. His authority over other royal family members was comprehensive, but his own family now faced increased scrutiny and pressure as the operational center of the monarchy. The children would grow up in a household where their father's decisions affected not just their immediate family, but the entire institution of the crown. Lady Susan Hussey, drawing on decades of experience with royal family dynamics, offered perspective that only someone with her institutional memory could provide. Security. Your Royal Highness, what you're undertaking has no direct precedent, but throughout history, the monarchy has survived by adapting to circumstances. While preserving core principles, your children will grow up understanding service and duty in ways that will serve them well. Just as you did, the afternoon brought the first real test of William's new authority. When Princess Beatrice's private secretary called to request approval for a series of charity events that had been planned months in advance. The events themselves were worthy causes, but the timing conflicted with a sensitive period when the royal family needed to maintain a low profile while the new authority structure was being established. William's decision to postpone the events, presented to Beatrice as a scheduling coordination issue rather than an exercise of authority, marked the first time he had directly overruled another royal family member's plans. The conversation with Beatrice, conducted over a secure phone line, required all of his diplomatic skills to maintain family harmony while establishing new boundaries. I understand your disappointment, William told his cousin, but the current situation requires us to be more coordinated in our public activities. Once we've got through the next few weeks, I'm confident we can reschedule everything in a way that gives your causes even better visibility. The day's final challenge came when the evening news broadcast reported on routine royal activities with no indication that anything fundamental had changed. The success of the transition's first day was measured not by what the public saw, but by what they didn't see. The seamless continuation of royal operations, despite a complete restructuring of internal authority. As William and Catherine returned to Adelaide Cottage that evening, both were exhausted by the intensity of managing the transformation that had to appear normal to the outside world. Their three children, unaware of the day's significance, greeted them with typical enthusiasm and stories about school activities. A reminder that even as their father had become the most powerful figure in the royal household, family life needed to continue as normally as possible. The evening briefing call with King Charles revealed the day's successes and challenges. Several family members had accepted scheduled changes without questioning the reasons. The media had not detected any unusual activity. Most importantly, the new protocols were functioning smoothly, suggesting that the authority transfer had been accomplished without creating operational disruptions. But Charles also warned William about the challenges ahead. Today was the easy part, he said quietly. Tomorrow, you'll start dealing with situations where family members realize their independence has been curtailed. That's when the real test of leadership begins. As William prepared for bed that night, he reflected on a day that had changed his life completely while appearing perfectly ordinary to everyone outside the palace walls. The phone calls he had made, the decisions he had authorized, and the protocols he had implemented represented the quiet exercise of power that most people never see, but that shapes the destiny of nations. The bedroom window overlooked the grounds of Adelaide Cottage, where his children slept peacefully, unaware that their father had spent the day reshaping the British monarchy. In a few hours, he would wake up as the person responsible not just for his own family's future, but for an institution that connected Britain to its history, while adapting to meet the challenges of an uncertain future. The transformation had begun not with fanfare, but with phone calls, briefing papers, and careful diplomatic conversations. By the end of William's first day in his new role, the British royal family was operating under fundamentally different rules, managed by a prince who was learning that true leadership often means making difficult decisions that nobody else can see or appreciate until history reveals their significance. 3 weeks into his new role, Prince William faced his first major crisis when Princess Anne arrived unannounced at Windsor Castle, her expression leaving no doubt that she had discovered the true extent of the authority changes that had been implemented. The Princess Royal, known for her direct approach and fierce independence, had apparently connected the dots between various protocol updates and scheduling restrictions that had initially appeared routine. "William," she said, standing in the doorway of his office with her arms crossed, "we need to talk. And I mean really talk, not the diplomatic dance everyone's been doing around here lately." The confrontation William had been anticipating for weeks was finally here. Princess Anne, with her decades of royal service and reputation for speaking her mind, represented the most significant test of his new authority structure. If he couldn't maintain control over his aunt, someone the public viewed as one of the most dedicated royals, the entire system Charles had put in place could collapse. "Aunt Anne," William gestured to the chairs near the fireplace, choosing the informal seating area rather than the formal desk setup to emphasize family relationships over authority. "Please, sit. You're right, it's time for complete honesty." What followed was a 2-hour conversation that would later be described by those present as one of the most crucial discussions in modern royal history. Princess Anne's questions were sharp and informed, revealing that she had conducted her own investigation into the changes affecting the royal household. The staircase. She had noticed the patterns, modified reporting structures, altered security protocols, and most tellingly, the requirement for approval on commitments she had previously managed independently. "You're basically running a benevolent dictatorship," Anne said bluntly, her tone mixing frustration with grudging admiration. "The question is whether you understand what you've taken on, and whether you're prepared for the consequences when the rest of the family figures out what's happening." William's response revealed the depth of thought he had given to the ethical implications of his new role. "Anne, everything I'm doing is aimed at protecting this institution so that future generations can serve the British people effectively. Some family members' actions were threatening not just their own reputations, but the monarchy's entire foundation. Someone had to take responsibility." The conversation that continued into the afternoon covered territory that went to the heart of what it meant to be a modern royal family. Princess Anne challenged William on every aspect of his new authority: the legal basis, the family consultation process, the long-term sustainability, and most importantly, the moral right to restrict other adults' freedom to make their own choices, even when those choices carried constitutional implications. "I've spent 40 years building relationships with organizations and causes that mattered to me," Anne explained, her voice carrying the weight of decades of service. "Suddenly, I need permission from my nephew to accept speaking engagements or visit the charities I've supported since before you were born. You need to understand why that's difficult to accept." William's careful response showed how much he had learned about balancing family dynamics with institutional needs. "I understand your frustration, and I respect everything you've accomplished. But I also need you to understand that some family members were making decisions that could have destroyed everything you've worked to build. This isn't about controlling anyone. It's about protecting the monarchy so that your work and everyone else's service continues to matter." Partner. The turning point in their discussion came when William shared information that had been kept from most family members. Specific intelligence about foreign interests attempting to exploit royal connections for political and financial gain. The details were alarming enough that even Princess Anne, with her skeptical approach to palace management, recognized the genuine threats that required coordinated response. By late afternoon, they had reached an understanding that would serve as the template for William's future relationships with senior family members. Princess Anne would maintain significant independence in her charitable work and public appearances, but would coordinate with William's office on timing and messaging to ensure her activities supported rather than complicated the broader royal strategy. "You've got my cooperation," Anne said as their meeting concluded, "but you also have my promise that I'll tell you when I think you're overreaching. This family needs people who will speak honestly to you, especially as your authority increases." The success of the conversation with Princess Anne enabled William to approach similar discussions with other family members from a position of proven diplomatic skill. Each negotiation required different strategies, as every royal had unique circumstances, concerns, and levels of understanding about the constitutional issues driving the changes. The conversation with the Earl of Wessex, Prince Edward, took place during a private dinner at Bagshot Park, where Edward and Sophie had created an atmosphere of family hospitality that made difficult topics easier to address. Edward's concerns focused primarily on how the new arrangements would affect his wife's charitable work and their children's future options within the royal family. Sophie has built incredible relationships with her patronages, Edward explained over coffee in their sitting room. She's not just a figurehead. She's genuinely involved in strategic planning for organizations that depend on royal support. How do we maintain that effectiveness while operating under new restrictions? William's response demonstrated how much his understanding of royal service had evolved since taking on his new responsibilities. Edward, the goal isn't to reduce anyone's effectiveness. It's to ensure that all our activities are coordinated in ways that maximize our collective impact while minimizing potential conflicts or vulnerabilities. Sophie's work is valuable precisely because it's genuine. That doesn't change. The conversation with the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester required even more delicate handling, as they represented the older generation of royals who had operated under the traditional system for decades. Their concerns went beyond personal authority to questions about whether the monarchy was abandoning principles that had served it well for generations. William, the Duke said during their meeting at Kensington Palace, I understand the need for coordination, but I worry about creating a system so centralized that it loses the flexibility that allows different family members to connect with different aspects of British society. The monarchy's strength has always been its ability to represent diverse interests and perspectives. These conversations revealed the complexity of William's task. He wasn't just managing individual relationships or administrative procedures. He was attempting to balance the monarchy's traditional diversity and independence with the need for coordinated action in an increasingly complex political and media environment. The most challenging discussion came with Zara Tindall, whose husband Mike's media career had created situations that now required careful management under the new protocols. The conversation took place at Gatcombe Park, where Zara's practical approach to royal life had always balanced family loyalty with personal independence. William, Zara said directly, Mike's work is part of our family's income. We can't just shut down opportunities because someone at the palace thinks they might be inappropriate. We need to find ways to make this work for everyone. And the solution they developed became a model for other family members facing similar challenges. Other than restricting Mike's media activities, William's office would work with their management team to ensure that appearances and endorsements were coordinated with royal family messaging and avoided potential conflicts with ongoing palace initiatives. Each of these conversations required William to exercise diplomatic skills that went far beyond anything his royal training had covered. He was simultaneously nephew, cousin, and institutional superior, roles that sometimes conflicted with each other and always required careful balance to maintain both family harmony and operational effectiveness. The evening briefings with King Charles during this period revealed the strain that the transition was placing on everyone involved. Charles, while supportive of the necessity for change, was clearly concerned about the long-term effects on family relationships that had taken decades to build and maintain. Son, Charles said during one particularly late evening call, what you're accomplishing is necessary and impressive, but don't lose sight of the fact that these people are our family first, royal family second. The institution needs to serve the people it's made up of, not the other way around. By the end of the month, William had successfully navigated the most difficult conversations with senior family members, establishing working relationships that preserved both institutional authority and family harmony. The process had required him to develop negotiation skills, diplomatic techniques, and emotional intelligence that would serve him well not just in managing the royal household, but in his future role as king. Catherine, who had observed many of these conversations and participated in several, offered her own perspective on what William had accomplished. You found ways to exercise authority while making people feel heard and respected, she told him one evening as they reviewed the day's outcomes. That's not just good palace management, it's good leadership. The transformation of the royal family's operational structure had moved beyond administrative changes to become a redefinition of how authority, responsibility, and family relationships intersected in service to the crown. William had proven that it was possible to exercise unprecedented control while maintaining the personal connections that made royal service both effective and sustainable. As autumn approached, The new system had achieved stability without sacrificing the diverse perspectives and specialized expertise that different family members brought to royal service. The monarchy was operating more coherently than it had in years, while individual royals continued to pursue meaningful work in their areas of expertise and interest. The success of these family negotiations had broader implications beyond the immediate crisis that prompted William's elevation to operational authority. He had demonstrated that the monarchy could adapt to modern challenges while preserving the relationships and traditions that gave it meaning and legitimacy in contemporary British society. The first major public test of William's new authority came during the autumn royal tour season, when traditional schedules had to be coordinated with the complex security and protocol requirements that his expanded role had created. What appeared to the media as simply better organized royal activities actually represented a complete transformation in how the monarchy managed its public presence. The challenge began when 3 different royal family members had committed to events in Scotland during the same week, creating logistical complications that under the old system would have been resolved through informal family coordination. Now, with William's office overseeing all royal activities, the solutions required balancing public expectations, family member preferences, and strategic communications objectives in ways that tested every aspect of the new authority structure. Princess Anne's commitment to open a new agricultural research facility conflicted with the Duke of Rothesay's environmental summit, while the Earl of Wessex had scheduled a series of arts patronage visits that would compete for media attention. Under normal circumstances, these overlapping commitments might have been managed through individual royal offices working independently. William's new role meant that coordination had to achieve broader strategic objectives while appearing completely natural to outside observers. The solution William developed with his communications team demonstrated the sophisticated thinking that was becoming characteristic of his leadership style. Rather than simply rescheduling events to avoid conflicts, they created a coordinated Scottish tour that presented the royal family as working together on connected themes: sustainable agriculture, environmental protection, and cultural preservation. The genius of what William orchestrated, explained a senior palace official months later, was that it turned potential scheduling conflicts into a coherent narrative about the royal family's commitment to Scotland's future. The media covered it as exceptional coordination rather than recognizing it as the result of centralized authority. The success of the Scottish coordination established a template that would be applied to royal activities throughout the Commonwealth. William's office began developing what they privately called thematic touring, grouping royal family activities around shared themes that reinforced consistent messages while allowing individual family members to focus on their areas of expertise and passion. But the real test came when international events forced rapid changes to carefully planned schedules. A political crisis in Canada required the cancellation of a planned royal visit, while unexpected opportunities in Australia demanded immediate decisions about representation. The speed and effectiveness with which William's team managed these changes impressed even veteran royal observers who had no idea about the authority structure that made such coordination possible. The autumn period also brought the first major media investigation into changes in royal operations. The persistent royal correspondent for the Times had noticed patterns in palace communications, scheduling coordination, and protocol modifications that suggested more significant changes than had been publicly acknowledged. The resulting inquiries required careful management to protect the confidentiality of William's actual authority while providing sufficient information to maintain media credibility. The strategy developed by the Royal Communications team was to present William's enhanced role as a natural evolution of his responsibilities as heir apparent, emphasizing his growing experience and the king's confidence in his judgment. The narrative focused on leadership development and institutional continuity rather than revealing the crisis management aspects that had necessitated the authority transfer. Prince William is increasingly taking on coordination responsibilities that prepare him for his future role as monarch. The official palace statement read, "This natural progression allows him to develop leadership skills while ensuring that royal family activities achieve maximum effectiveness in serving the British people and Commonwealth nations." The media response was overwhelmingly positive, with commentators praising William's organizational abilities and leadership qualities. Several editorial pieces specifically noted the improved coordination of royal activities and the more coherent messaging that had emerged from palace communications. The coverage achieved exactly what William's team had hoped: recognition of enhanced effectiveness without revealing the extent of authority that made it possible. However, the increased media attention created new challenges for William's family life. Photographers and reporters began paying closer attention to his movements, interpreting routine meetings as signs of increased responsibility, and analyzing every public appearance for evidence of his expanded role. The children, particularly Prince George as the eldest, began asking questions about why their father's schedule had become more demanding and why security arrangements had subtly increased. Catherine found herself playing an increasingly important role in maintaining family normalcy while supporting William's public responsibilities. Her background in art history and communications proved valuable in understanding media dynamics and helping develop strategies that protected their children while allowing William to fulfill his new duties effectively. The hardest part, Catherine confided to a close friend, isn't the increased responsibility or public attention. It's making sure the children understand that their father's work is important without making them feel like our family life comes second. They need to see that serving others is valuable, but they also need to feel secure and loved. The challenge of balancing family life with expanded royal duties became more complex when William's new authority required him to make decisions that affected other royal family members' relationships with their own children. When a situation arose involving one of the younger royals whose social media activities were creating potential problems, William had to exercise authority that indirectly affected family dynamics he didn't directly control. The resolution of that situation demonstrated William's growing sophistication in handling sensitive family matters. Rather than issuing direct orders about social media use, his office worked with the young person's parents to develop guidelines that achieved necessary protection while respecting family autonomy. The approach balanced institutional needs with family relationships in ways that preserved William's authority while avoiding conflicts that could have damaged broader family unity. The Christmas season brought new opportunities to demonstrate the effectiveness of coordinated royal activities. The traditional pattern of separate Christmas messages and individual family celebrations was replaced by a more coordinated approach that presented the royal family as united around shared values while maintaining individual personalities and interests. The Christmas broadcast, while still delivered by King Charles as monarch, incorporated elements that showcased the coordinated work of various royal family members throughout the year. William's role in developing the content and messaging was significant, but remained invisible to viewers, who saw only a more coherent and compelling presentation of royal service than had been achieved in previous years. Behind the scenes, the Christmas period also marked the first full assessment of William's new authority structure by constitutional experts and senior government officials. The review, conducted confidentially through existing palace consultation processes, concluded that the changes had strengthened rather than complicated the monarchy's relationship with other institutions of government. What Prince William has achieved, noted one senior civil servant in a confidential memo, is the modernization of royal operations without creating constitutional complications. The monarchy is more effective as a partner to government while maintaining appropriate independence and neutrality. Established William's credibility as an operational leader rather than simply an heir-apparent learning through observation. Ability to coordinate complex activities involving multiple family members, government officials, and international partners demonstrated executive skills that exceeded what most observers expected from someone who had never held formal authority positions outside the military. The private feedback William received from family members during this period was largely positive, though it came with warnings about the long-term challenges of maintaining such intensive coordination. Princess Anne, true to her promise to provide honest counsel, noted that the current system worked because family members were cooperating voluntarily, but future challenges might require more difficult decisions about compliance and consequences. Done well so far, she told William during a private conversation at Sandringham, but you haven't yet faced a situation where someone simply refuses to cooperate. When that happens, and it will, you'll discover whether your authority is real or just depends on family goodwill. The warning proved prophetic, as the new year would bring challenges that tested not just William's diplomatic skills, but his willingness to use the full extent of his authority when family cooperation wasn't sufficient to protect institutional interests. The success of his first months in operational control had established credibility and relationships that would prove essential when more difficult decisions became necessary. As winter deepened around the royal residences, William reflected on a period that had transformed him from heir apparent to effective head of royal operations. The public saw improved coordination and more effective royal service. Family members experienced greater support and clearer direction. Government officials worked with a monarchy that was more reliable and predictable as a partner. But William understood that the real tests lay ahead, when the authority he had exercised diplomatically and cooperatively would need to be applied in situations where family harmony and institutional needs came into direct conflict. The foundation he had built during the autumn would determine whether the monarchy could navigate future challenges while maintaining both effectiveness and legitimacy in an increasingly complex world. The crisis that would define William's leadership came unexpectedly on a cold February morning, when intelligence services informed the palace that Prince Harry's upcoming memoir contained revelations that could trigger a constitutional crisis. The book, scheduled for publication in 6 weeks, reportedly included details about internal royal family discussions that touched on government policy matters, information that could undermine the monarchy's carefully maintained political neutrality. William received a briefing in the same oak drawing room where his authority had first been established 8 months earlier, but now the space felt familiar rather than overwhelming. The gathered officials, including representatives from MI5, the cabinet secretary, and senior palace staff, looked to him for decisions that would affect not just his family relationships, but the constitutional framework that governed Britain's democracy. The specific passages we're concerned about, explained the intelligence briefer, involve conversations Harry claims to have overheard about government policy positions during the COVID pandemic and Brexit negotiations. Whether or not the accounts are accurate, their publication would suggest that the royal family was involved in political discussions that constitutionally should have remained separate from crown considerations. The legal implications were staggering. If foreign courts or political opponents could claim that the British royal family had been improperly involved in government policy decisions, it could undermine the constitutional settlement that had evolved over centuries to balance democratic governance with monarchical traditions. William's response demonstrated how much his understanding of royal authority had evolved since taking on his new role. What are our options for preventing publication, and what are the consequences of each approach? He asked, showing that his thinking now automatically included both immediate crisis management and long-term strategic implications.
The options presented were all problematic in different ways.
Legal action might prevent publication but would create media attention that could be more damaging than the book itself. Diplomatic pressure through publishing channels might work, but would require revealing the seriousness of the constitutional concerns, potentially creating the very crisis they were trying to prevent. The solution William ultimately chose reflected the sophisticated approach he had developed to managing family and institutional challenges simultaneously. Rather than trying to prevent publication, he decided to take preemptive action that would minimize the book's impact while addressing the underlying issues it raised. Working with the government's communications specialists and constitutional experts, William's team developed a comprehensive strategy that included public education about the monarchy's constitutional role, proactive engagement with media to provide accurate context for any revelations, and most importantly, direct communication with Harry to explain the potential consequences of his planned disclosures. The phone call between the brothers, conducted on a secure line with legal advisors present, represented the most significant test of William's new authority since it began. Unlike his successful negotiations with other family members, this conversation involved someone who was no longer part of the operational royal family structure, and who might have motivations that prioritized personal expression over institutional protection. Harry, William began, his voice carrying both brotherly concern and official authority, I need you to understand that some of the information you're planning to publish could damage not just our family, but the constitutional framework that protects British democracy. This isn't about family privacy. It's about institutional responsibilities that affect millions of people. The conversation that followed lasted nearly 2 hours and covered ground that went far beyond the immediate publication concerns. Harry's responses revealed the depth of his resentment about what he saw as institutional prioritization over family relationships, while William's explanations focused on the broader responsibilities that came with royal position and the unintended consequences that personal actions could have on public institutions. The breakthrough came when William was able to explain specific examples of how the revelations Harry planned to make could be exploited by hostile foreign governments and political extremists to undermine British democratic institutions. The discussion moved beyond family grievances to focus on shared values about protecting democratic freedoms and preventing the exploitation of royal connections for harmful purposes. "I'm not asking you to abandon your right to tell your story," William explained. "I'm asking you to work with us to find ways to express your experiences that don't inadvertently provide ammunition to people who want to damage the institutions that protect British freedoms." The resolution they reached became a template for managing similar challenges in the future. Harry agreed to work with independent legal experts to review the manuscript and remove or modify passages that could create constitutional vulnerabilities, while William committed to supporting broader conversations about modernizing royal family operations to prevent future conflicts between personal expression and institutional needs. The process took several weeks and required William to balance multiple competing interests: Harry's desire for personal expression, the publisher's commercial interests, public fascination with royal family revelations, government concerns about constitutional implications, and the long-term credibility of the monarchy as an institution. The final published version of Harry's memoir included personal reflections and family history, but avoided the specific political details that had created the constitutional concerns. The careful editing was accomplished in ways that preserved Harry's voice and experiences while protecting institutional interests, a compromise that satisfied no one completely, but prevented the crisis that all parties had feared. The successful resolution of the memoir crisis established William's credibility as a leader capable of managing the most difficult challenges the modern monarchy faced. His ability to navigate family relationships, government concerns, media interests, and constitutional requirements in a single complex situation demonstrated executive abilities that impressed even skeptical observers. But the greater significance lay in how the crisis had been resolved. Rather than using his authority to simply suppress information or override family member autonomy, William had found ways to balance competing legitimate interests while protecting the broader institutional framework that made royal service meaningful and sustainable. The months following the memoir resolution saw William's role evolve from crisis management to strategic development. With the most serious threats to the monarchy's stability now managed, he was able to focus on longer-term initiatives that would strengthen royal service while preventing future conflicts between personal desires and institutional needs. This system was the development of what palace officials privately called the Royal Service Framework, a comprehensive set of guidelines, support systems, and career pathways that would help future royal family members understand their options and responsibilities from an early age. The framework addressed everything from education and career planning to media relations and financial management, providing structure that previous generations had largely navigated through informal family guidance. Catherine played a crucial role in developing the framework's provisions for spouses and children, drawing on her own experience of adapting to royal life while maintaining personal identity and values. Her insights helped create support systems that would make royal service more sustainable for future generations while maintaining the high standards that public service required. The second initiative focused on modernizing the monarchy's relationship with media and public communication. Working with communications experts and constitutional scholars, William's team developed new protocols that balanced transparency with privacy, public interest with family autonomy, and traditional respect with contemporary accessibility. "What we're creating," William explained to the team developing these protocols, "the district is a framework that allows the monarchy to serve effectively in a digital age while maintaining the dignity and independence that make royal service valuable to the British people." The success of these initiatives attracted international attention from other constitutional monarchies facing similar challenges. Traditional institutions with modern social expectations. William found himself consulting with representatives from Commonwealth realms and European monarchies about strategies for institutional modernization that preserved legitimacy while adapting to changing circumstances. As spring arrived at the royal residences, William reflected on a year that had transformed not just his own role, but the entire operational structure of the British monarchy. The institution that had seemed threatened by internal conflicts and external pressures 12 months earlier was now operating with unprecedented coordination and effectiveness. Public perception of the royal family had improved significantly, with polling showing increased confidence in the monarchy's future and greater appreciation for royal service across all demographic groups. The improvements were attributed to better coordination, clearer communication, and more effective engagement with contemporary challenges, all results of the authority structure William had implemented and refined through experience. More importantly, family relationships had not just survived the institutional changes, but had been strengthened by clearer expectations and better support systems. Royal family members reported feeling more confident in their roles and better equipped to handle the pressures that came with public service. King Charles, observing his son's success in managing challenges that had threatened to overwhelm the monarchy, began discussions about formalizing William's role in ways that would provide constitutional recognition for the authority he had been exercising effectively but unofficially. What you've accomplished, Charles told William during one of their regular evening briefings, has exceeded what any of us hoped for when we first discussed these changes. You've not just managed crises, you've transformed how this institution operates in ways that will serve it well long after both of us are gone. As summer approached, William's authority had evolved from emergency crisis management to systematic institutional leadership. The monarchy was operating more effectively than it had in decades. Family relationships were stronger than they had been in years, and public confidence in royal service was at levels not seen since the early years of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. The transformation had been accomplished not through dramatic public announcements or constitutional changes, but through careful leadership, diplomatic skill, and unwavering commitment to balancing personal relationships with institutional responsibilities. William had proven that the monarchy could adapt to modern challenges while preserving the traditions and relationships that gave it meaning and legitimacy. Standing in the same Windsor Castle study where his new role had begun, William looked out at grounds where his children played, secure in the knowledge that they would inherit an institution stronger and more sustainable than the one that had been entrusted to his care. The quiet revolution he had led was complete, and the British monarchy was prepared for whatever challenges the future might bring.